The science of identity. Why you can't outperform your self-image. Now, this is going to be a full breakdown. I'm not sure how long it will be. It's just notes that I've taken and things that I've implemented in my own life, understandings, research that I've done. So, by no means am I saying that I'm an expert. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do use neuroscience to back my explanations, just because it makes more sense when you hear the logical, along with the mystical, esoteric understandings of things. That's kind of the niche that I like to go down, and it's helped me a lot in terms of understanding both sides. So before we get into it, most people, they try to change their habits through routines, even their goals, but nothing sticks, right? And the reason is simple. You can never outperform your self-image, which is just the image that you have of yourself. Now, in this video, I'm going to break down what self-image is, why your brain fights to keep you the same, how other people's perceptions shape your identity, the neuroscience that proves you can rewire it, a few powerful quotes and studies that helped me essentially build my knowledge, build myself, and then just my own story of realizing that I couldn't outwork a broken self-image, and finally just 5 action steps for you to take so you can implement it today and upgrade who you are. By the end, you'll see exactly why identity is the root of lasting change and how to finally shift yours. This isn't some bullshit methods, hacks, tips, tricks. This is purely just me and my experience, the knowledge that I've gained through my experience and understanding how to navigate my experience. And I'm just hoping that it will help you too, the same way that it helps my clients. So, self-image as a performance ceiling. You see, Maxwell Maltz, the author of Cybernetics, So Maxwell Maltz in Psycho-Cybernetics argued that the self-image is the key to human personality and behavior change. Change the self-image and you change the personality and the behavior. Now, your self-image sets a psychological ceiling until it shifts. Higher performance feels incongruent with your identity. So it doesn't matter what you try to do, the actions you try to take. If you do not believe that you are someone else, then you will not act in alignment with that version, or you will not act as though you are that person. So this leads into self-image influencing your confidence, motivation, and your behavior. In psychology, self-image is defined as a foundational part of personality. It's impacting relationships and well-being. And positive self-image fuels confidence. It fuels motivation. Having a negative self-image literally erodes them. So your cognitive dissonance and identity mismatch, this is like the separation in your mind. Even though there isn't any, there's, again, this is a deeper topic, but it's essentially the confusion between, or crisis you could call it, between your identities, right? This is when your actions don't align with your sense of self. Cognitive dissonance creates discomfort, which tends to pull you back toward your current identity. And I took this from Festinger's theory in 1957. And this was because I want you to think of your brain like a battery pack. Now, as you use your brain throughout the day, you do certain things. What happens is you start to deplete in power, in output. And think of your phone similarly. Once you hit like low power mode on like iPhone or any device that you have, and you go into like that battery saver, that's like your default setting. That's like low screen, low output, and like slower speeds. Think of it like that. Think of like when you're on 1% and how you know you're on 1% because you start lagging. Your phone's lagging, the camera's lagging, right? And that is what it's like in real life. That's what it's like being human. So when you face this discomfort, when you face this dissonance, you're going to revert back to your believed self, the version of you that you're currently trying to change, that you're trying to escape from, that you're trying to be different to, right? Now, self-discrepancy theory by Higgins in 1987, it shows that gaps between your actual ideal and ought selves, so just the higher version of you, produce emotional discomfort, and your performance reflects that alignment. So this is where you essentially believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you should act in this type of way, that you should be this person. Remember, should is such a dangerous word. But anything that you feel like I should have done this, I should have done that, right? It's going to create and produce an emotional discomfort within you that says, it's almost like disappointment and guilt and all these emotions that you'll feel. And then your performance will reflect that. And this is why we fall into the compulsive habits or actions and, pornography. We speak about binge eating and all these things, to my understanding anyways, and what's worked for me. Self-schema and identity stability. Now, a self-schema is the stable set of beliefs and memories you hold about yourself in a domain. For example, I am not athletic, I'm creative. These schemas guide your perception of yourself and filter new experiences, making identity shifts feel hard but default. Hard by default. And what this means is, if you see yourself as lazy, you're going to find it damn well hard to stop being active. If you see yourself as a fat person, you're going to find it difficult to go to the gym. It's an identity layer crisis, essentially. And it is a crisis because you're trying to change it, yet you're battling to stay the same. And this is why. If you believe, I'm not athletic, I'm creative, now you won't go to the gym because you like to draw. And that may seem like extreme, but it happens. And I've had my own personal experiences as well that I can share, but the video, I don't want to bore you too much. But an easy one for me is, I always used to joke about being broke, but yet the more I joked about it, the more broke I got. And I didn't believe that I would make money until I did. And it was, well, not even until I did, it was the way that I did it. And I'm speaking about money just because it's pretty universal. Again, the clients that I work with, and if this sounds like you, we can work together. But shameless plug. They have already conquered the money game. They're no longer worried about money. They're no longer worried about, can I pay my bills? Instead, they're thinking, I've done all of this. Why do I feel empty? Why do I still have these habits? Why do I do the things that I do even though I don't want to do them. You know, I have this financial success, you know, 6 figures, 7 figures, and yet I still can't break this cycle. Maybe they even broke it from being poor, having no money, to having money, right? And this is why it's so interesting, because, you know, people, this is where the whole thing of people saying millionaires, you know, are some of the least happy people. I mean, how many millionaires do you know? You know, unless you're one yourself, how many do you really know? Because I didn't know any until I was 20, until last year, so 21. You know, and essentially what I'm trying to get at is the things that we're going through will change your life. That's quite literally the point I'm trying to get at. Now, your social reflections also shape your self-image. Now, Charles Cooley, in his theory of the looking glass theory, or the looking glass self, just states how we form our self-image by imagining how others perceive us and interpret those reactions. So if people around you treat you as not someone who excels, your internal self-image absorbs that, even if unspoken. People do not need to say to you, oh, you're dumb, or you're unattractive, or you're ugly. You can have their own perception of you and the way that you look at the world. Remember, I heard this before. I don't think I've actually put it in here, but you're not born with judgment. You're not born with the anxiety. You're not born with anything, right? And the brain doesn't actually know how to comprehend judgment. Remember, the brain it works in a way of outputs, right? But for there to be outputs, there must be inputs. Now, those inputs come from your own judgment. So think about it like this. If I were to judge someone else, I only know that person can judge me because I've judged them, or I've judged someone else. If you didn't know what judgment was, then you wouldn't even be able to comprehend the idea of it, right? So this is where the theory essentially originates from. It's you seeing yourself through other people's eyes and then allowing that perception to become your truth and your identity. For people to look at you and say, oh, they probably think I'm fat. And you don't have to say it. Again, even if it's unspoken, you don't have to say those things. It's just what you internalize. And this is why positive self-talk literally rewires performance expectations. Alright? Neuropsychology neuropsychological research shows that positive versus negative self-talk differently modulates brain states, and it's related to cognitive performance. So your ability to perform, your brain's ability to perform, operates differently due to different states of self-talk, whether that be positive or negative. And the research showed it for itself. And I can speak from experience because as an athlete or a former athlete, I was the same. Again, that's identity. When I saw myself as an athlete, my self-talk was terrible until the end. And maybe from the beginning, if I had a different outlook, my self-talk was different, maybe things would have been different. But I did get pretty far with the self-talk that I had. It was just an uphill battle. Let's say that for the least. But I played at a high level. I had scholarships, had, career opportunities. But life is life, and before we get too far off topic, this is why I speak about the things that I do, because I'm experiencing them and I'm learning them and they've helped me, right? So repeated affirmations and self-belief can begin to shift the brain's performance baseline. Begin. Remember, I said begin. Just because you speak affirmations, just because you say things in the mirror, just because you say whatever, you're not actually doing much. Again, you're just changing the behavior. So instead of you saying, I'm a loser, you're saying, I'm a winner. And yes, that is a lot better. But remember, only 5% of your brain is conscious. So you saying that, you have to say it repetitively, and then actually allow your actions to reflect those affirmations. So you go from just the beginning of a shift to actually shifting. Now, this is just like, if you want to do some further research, but this is just where I get my ideas from. So, psycho-cybernetics, simply psychology, the self-discrepancy theory, self-schema, looking glass self, and just self-talk and brain function in itself. So you can go and study those. And that just shows you how, I just set out my notes. Now, to finish off, here are your action steps. Now, make sure you did not watch this video and just do nothing. This is not for entertainment. I do not make these videos for entertainment. I make these videos so I can rewatch them myself and take notes. More notes on what I said, on how I can improve, on things I missed. So I want you to do the same. So the identity reframe. Write down one limiting belief. And for example, I'm not a leader. I am addicted to junk food, whatever it is. And reframe it as, I am becoming a leader. And repeat this daily. And act as if for small tasks. Which I just mean, act as though you're already that person. In fact, I'm going to scrap this because I actually want you to do this instead. And you can see this is how I go through things. I am a leader. Because there's no such thing as becoming, right? You either are or you're not. And it's okay to say yeah, I'm working on it. But just remember, the longer that you say you're working on something, the longer you're delaying. That's all it is. Right? I'm not becoming an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur. I'm not an aspiring artist. I am an artist. Right? Your visual evidence logs. You can track micro successes that contradict yourself or your current self-image. Example, if you think I'm not productive, log a day where you smashed all your tasks. And actually provide yourself with proof, evidence that you can look back at and say, oh, I did that. You see, this works phenomenally, and it has for me. Especially when I had my tracker on a piece of paper next to my bed. I would tick things off, cross them off, add notes, and I would do that every day. Now I do it on Notion instead. But it worked like magic, you could say. Your feedback audit. Notice how other people treat you, and when it supports or undermines your desired identity. Capture those behaviors and reinforce the supporting ones consciously. Remember, we only have 5% of power. Now, you can bring 100% of power to an action, but you have to be fully present. It's very difficult, and it's why it's so difficult for many people to do this, but it's not for you because you're watching this video. Remember that as long as you're present, as long as you're fully here, you're not thinking about next week, yesterday, what you're having for dinner, who's playing football, or whatever on TV, yeah, you will be able to bring more power to your conscious change, and that will create your desired identity. Now, what I want you to try is a self-talk interruption. Catch a negative thought midstream. I can't, and pause to replace it with a constructive affirmation. I'm learning to, or I am. Again, the reason why I am becoming, I am learning, is because when I made these, I was under that understanding, and as I've got deeper into it, it has revealed itself to me. Consistency rewires internal dialogue. So the more that you do this, the more that you go through everything, the more consistent you are, the harder the rewiring is, and the less likely you are to relapse, to go back, and to reinforce that old identity. And finally, your ideal self enactment. Choose one behavior your ideal self would have. For example, preparing a talk, journaling, networking, and commit to doing it. Even if it feels outside your comfort zone, just do it. I understand. There's many things that feel as though they are pointless, but when you see the effects of them over time, you realize why they're so appreciated. And that's it for today. I want to leave you with this one thing. The identity that you have, that you created, is only a matter of illusions. So decide the illusions that you want to believe. And I'll see you next time.